Hello, people of the internet. I am Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir, here with a comic book review, which is something that I haven't done in quite a while. But given the upcoming release of Jason David Frank's Legend of the White Dragon, I thought it would be very appropriate to discuss a comic that I've actually wanted to talk a lot about for quite some time now. And here with me today to discuss this graphic novel, it is the one and only kaiju novelist himself, Mr. Matthew Dennion.
Hey, everybody. And Andres, it's great to do a recording with you again, man. I know we've both been very busy. I'm thrilled to do this with you. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Like, you know, you and I, we have been on the channel talking about many things that we enjoy, we love, and are passionate about. And it's really great to be able to do this again after so long. So yeah, you know, you and I had talked about doing a review for Power Rangers Soul of the Dragon, a 2018 graphic novel from Boom Studios, which was written by Kyle Higgins, who at the time was writing the ongoing Mighty Morphin Power Ranger comic series for the first 30 issues between January 2016 to August of 2018, culminating in the wildly beloved Shattered Glass event that people still look back on fondly to this day. And so it was really cool that they had come out with, I believe this was their first like standalone graphic novel. I know that they would eventually do more down the line. In fact, the artist behind this comic, Giuseppe Cafaro, I apologize if I mispronounce his name, would go on to do several one-shot graphic novels and single issues. So I guess my question for you, Matt, is what has been your background with the Boom Studios handling of the Power Rangers property?
I've been with them pretty much from the start, reading their comics. Yeah. I remember, like you said, when Shattered Grid came out, the build up to that was great. The fans love it. As a longtime Power Rangers fan, it was great to see expanding beyond just the Mighty Morphin, which we all love, but it's cool to see like SPD get some inclusion and Lightspeed Rescue and some of those other things was cool. And, you know, the series, I think, would come and go in terms of its strength. But this was like around the high point for it. And Kyle Higgins, I feel, definitely had a great voice for Power Rangers when he was doing his run on it. And it kind of like laid the groundwork for his Radiant Black series, which I'm a huge fan of, which is very obviously Power Rangers inspired as well, but just like, you know, more mature even because it's his own title, so he can do a little bit more with it. But yeah, I really enjoyed his run on the series. It really took the heroes that we grew up with as kids and did make them more like adult and made the stories more engaging as opposed to just, you know, monster shows up, they have to fight it off, you know, that type of thing. But I do feel like the Soul of the Dragon story is one of the best written Power Ranger stories in terms of like character arc. What do you feel about that?
Oh, absolutely. I've always found Soul of the Dragon to be such an interesting take on the franchise because it's not like we've had like reunion specials before. We've had stuff like Once and Always recently, Power Rangers Once and Always recently in 2023 to celebrate the 30th anniversary. Even Super Sentai would have things like recently they had a 30th anniversary special for Ninja Sentai Kaku Ranger. You know, we'd also get like 10th anniversaries and 20th anniversaries for stuff like Abba Ranger, Hurricaneger, Deca Ranger. But this is less of a reunion special, and rather this feels like a very conclusive end to what is, you know, arguably the most popular character in all of Power Rangers. It's a very ballsy move if you really think about it. And the fact that this came out in 2018, 4 years before the tragic loss of Jason David Frank, it kind of gives this comic, like, I'm sorry if this comes off as morbid or macabre in any way, but it kind of gives it a far more, like, significant feel to the character because we clearly are never going to see Tommy Oliver in live action ever again. So to get some sort of like a proper resolution to the character, especially this was like right on the heels of the 25th anniversary of the franchise. I think it was called Dimensions in Danger, and that was the one that featured the last official appearance of Tommy Oliver and the Master Morpher, both of which is an element that it appears that is has a very large presence in this comic as well. So it's like it's sort of I gotta commend them for having like the I'm not sure whose idea it was, but for them to give a final send-off for Tommy Oliver, essentially creating what many people have labeled Old Man Tommy, in the similar, right? Similar vein to say like Old Man Logan or even Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, from Frank Miller. We have ourselves like an aged hero who's long past his prime, who still has one last fight in him, trying to like make sure that he leaves a solid enough legacy behind and ensures the safety of the Earth and most importantly his son J.J. Oliver. And during this time, I had heard a lot of hype surrounding Kyle Higgins' run on the comics, and eventually I would check out the comics, and I was absolutely blown away by how he was able to take what was established in the TV series and give it a sense of relatability, give a lot of characters far more depth. He gave the universe this, like, make it feel like a more believable world where actions have consequences and characters go through their natural flow, their natural journeys filled with drama and character development. It made Power Rangers, it's sort of like this is the version that I'm sure a lot of adult Power Ranger fans wish that the TV show could be like. Or there's been a lot of people who want to see Power Rangers grow up with them, and this feels like the closest that it has ever gone to successfully doing that. It's not trying to be like like overtly grim and gritty and edgy, like say Power Slash Rangers, that fan film from several years back. It's not trying to be like the 2017 Power Rangers movie, which I know you enjoyed that movie far more than I have, but that movie, for me at least, felt like it ultimately, in the long run, alienated like mainstream audiences and Power Ranger fans by trying to be something very different that was almost like unrecognizable for a lot of people. But with the case of Kyle Higgins' run, like, it looks like Power Rangers, it feels like Power Rangers, but at the same time it feels much more than that. And so to hear that he had created this series with Jason David Frank as a consultant on the story, making sure that it pays respect to the character that he had brought to life time and time again. It gave this series, like, immediately, for me at least, an air of legitimacy. Like, yeah, this is the canonical end to Tommy Oliver. And the last thing I will say, like, before we get into the story, is that what I find interesting about this comic is that it's not so much trying to take place in the continuity of the 2016 Power Rangers comic, but rather it feels like it's trying to be sort of like emblematic of everything that came before within the TV series. It brings up the Master Morpher, it brings up Space Patrol Delta, it brings up a lot of references to past adventures from the TV shows, and there's so much fan service, but it's fan service that serves a purpose for the story each and every time. So for them to do like a TV-based story as opposed to a comic one, that's what also stood out to me the most for that. So
you're making Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say like that was pretty much what my thoughts were going into it upon learning about the comic for the first time.
Yeah, I was going to say, you made a really good point there, because you can, if you haven't read any of the comics, you can, and just watch the TV series, you can pick this up and feel like you haven't missed a beat. Because like you said, it is very kind of tied back into the TV series, even more so than the comics. It does continue the feel of the comics, but I don't know that it's set even necessarily in the same universe. It's kind of like you'd mentioned, like Dark Knight Returns. It's not really like in the same universe as mainline Batman, but you can pick it up and figure out what's going on. So I do think if you're a fan of the comics, you'll appreciate this. But if you're just a fan of the show and you're looking, especially now, to kind of have a goodbye to Tommy Oliver, this is a great story to pick up.
Absolutely. And, even beyond the unfortunate passing of Jason David Frank, it's like in a vacuum, this is still a really solid Power Ranger story that takes like the character that people know and love and put him in a very interesting, vulnerable situation that really tests the character's physical, mental, and emotional capacity. So to get right into it, the story takes place well into the future. People have speculated that this might take place sometime in the 2030s, if not the early 2040s, given that SPD is widely established and SPD itself canonically takes place in 2025. So by this setting, aliens are very common. SPD is the primary law enforcement organization in this setting. We hear inklings and rumors of gang fights, of alien conflicts going around, and we have we meet Tommy Oliver, Dr. Tommy Oliver, who is enjoying his retirement party, where unfortunately at his school, they are cutting the department that he would do research and teaching in. So he's sort of like in a period of transition where he is no longer an educator. He is getting, transitioning into retirement, and he's sort of like left in this sort of state of self-reflection, just like a state of unsureness as to what to do with his life going forward. And we also learn at this point that he had been forced to retire from being a Power Ranger. On top of all of that, for years prior, at a certain point in time, he was fighting this big alien threat that ultimately shattered his spine and required him to have this cybernetic implant to keep his body active. But the same event that crippled him ultimately also significantly and irrevocably damaged his master morpher. So during this period where, again, he's going through a lot of self-reflection, his son goes missing. His son, who is a former SPD cadet, goes missing. And so through the help of his son's friend, Anara, he goes on one last mission to track down his son, find out what the connection is between JJ and these alien gang lords, and ultimately trying to find his place in the world beyond being a ranger, but not just being a ranger, but being a father as well.
Right, being a father, and I think to an extent a husband as well, because he's married to Kat from this, which was established in this series, and then is further explored in some of the books. So she is there early on too, and kind of mentions to Tommy that she has one last thing she has to do, and then she's looking forward to them taking their next part of their journey in their life together. That's not fighting monsters and aliens and saving the world. Tommy's feeling kind of down about himself when he looks early in the story, and he's like, there's still bad things happening. She's like, we saved the world dozens of times over. You should be pretty happy about that. Nobody can make everything perfect. But Tommy holds himself to a high standard. Mm-hmm. And then one thing I think that's interesting is they start off early in this book is most people don't know Tommy was a Power Ranger. When he goes to see the doctor about his back, he just references a car accident. Right. But anybody who does, which is the majority of SPD, it's kind of established that his son JJ is maybe having a little bit of difficulty living up to his dad's
reputation.
Legend. Because, reputation. Because Tommy is still regarded by most of the Rangers as the best Ranger ever. In fact, I think they specifically mention that in the book, even that he's the kind of the gold standard for which Rangers are looked at.
People would in both earnestly and jokingly refer to him as the legendary Tommy Oliver.
Right, right. So that sets up a unique dynamic where Tommy is wondering if he has done his son a disservice, perhaps, by not making sure he was ready to go into the same field as him
Mm-hmm.
and have to navigate around being the son of a legend.
Absolutely. And I think this story draws very interesting parallels between JJ and Tommy. Both of them are at a point of transitions in their lives. Tommy, he's slowing down. He's getting ready to, end his journey, whereas JJ is starting just at the point where he is beginning his journey towards becoming a ranger. And both of them are unsure about what they're going to do going forward. He's like, you have Tommy, who's basically constantly asking himself, have I done enough already? As you have JJ saying, like, can I do enough to live up to what my father has done all these, for all these years? And both of them have sort of like isolated themselves from everyone around them to a certain degree. It's mentioned through Anara that JJ doesn't have that many friends, and that Anara is basically the closest thing he has to a friend, that he has kept to himself, has kind of isolated himself, going so far as to even mysteriously drop out of SPD for reasons that are later revealed in the comic. Meanwhile, you have Tommy again. You don't really, outside of Kat seems to be the only emotional support he has in his life, because we don't see any other classic Rangers in the story. So it's very possible to infer that this is a version of Tommy who is sort of like wrapped himself up in his work to sort of like keep him distracted enough. And at the same time, once that work is no longer there, he's now left with like, okay, what do I have in life? Because it's even stated that like he hasn't talked to his son enough, and begins to have that regret of like, did I do enough for my son? Was I there for him? Was I able to like do him justice, or have I only burdened him more with what I've done so far? So yeah,
Right, right.
I would say like it's very interesting just to like compare and contrast these two characters, whereas by the end of the comic, both of them ultimately find themselves in a much better place. Both of them have grown closer together, not just with each other, but with the people around them, and both realizing that neither of them can take on the world alone, and to accept that. And to accept the fact that they don't have to share all of that burden on themselves.
Right, right. And for Tommy to kind of feel fulfilled with what he has done, and then be ready to go on to the next stage of his life. And then for JJ, and we'll get to it, but when he gets to the end, he feels like, oh, I do have the skills and the tools to be successful in this career that I've chosen. So it's a very nice, like, passing of the torch type of story.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. And I know that we haven't seen much of JJ since this comic, though it would be really cool to actually see him as the, there are spoilers for this comic, just to let folks know, but definitely check this comic out before we eventually spoil the comic. Yeah. But going to the spoilers, by the end of the comic, he becomes, I believe, what the wiki refers to as the SPD Dragon Ranger. And he's literally carrying the dragon shield that his father once wore. So kind of inferring that, yeah, the mantle has been passed. The legacy of Tommy lives on through JJ. And honestly, it would have been cool just to continue seeing this character. But where the comic ends, it ends in a very solid place, knowing that sort of like one of those, the adventure continues just with a new protagonist at the front.
Right. Which is really neat. And then I feel like you and I are both big like noir fans, and I feel like this comic has a kind of a noir feel to it, even with Tommy having work as a detective and shift through things and being kind of a flawed hero. What do you feel like?
Oh, absolutely. This was pretty much exactly why I wanted to do this comic to review this comic with you, because I felt like it was made specifically for you and I. Both of us, we love tokusatsu, we love our henshin heroes, we love our noir protagonist, and yeah, I was genuinely like surprised and. I was happily surprised with the direction this story took. It's not so much a big giant all-out brawl, which does eventually happen by the end because it's Power Rangers, but it takes itself in a very interesting direction where SPD, for reasons unknown to our protagonists, are very quiet on the state of JJ Oliver. Leading to Tommy to not trust them. He's not depending on them. He doesn't want, we mentioned before, he has seemingly isolated himself from everyone else. Even Kat has gone off to the planet Triforia. For those who don't know, that's where Trey of Triforia, the Zeo Gold Ranger, came from. She's going there on going to a certain conference or event, and this is basically Tommy, who is going out on his own, save for Anara, who is this alien SPD cadet and an acquaintance of JJ. And so he doesn't have the support of a full Ranger team. He doesn't have the support of any sort of organization. And to top it all off, his Master Morpher is so busted that each time he uses his Morpher, each of his power coins are gone forever, essentially. And so he has limited resources, limited power at his disposal, and so all that's left for him is just to use mostly his wits and Anara's knowledge of the crime landscape in order to infiltrate the sort of seedy underbelly of this city, of this alien-infused, crime-ridden city, to sort of to navigate his way through this sort of environment in order to find his son. And so you do get a lot of those like noirish detective tropes of, we gotta go to the seedy bar where all the villains hang out, find out where their leader is, you gotta get a name in there, use that name to talk to another guy. This guy might know a thing or two about this one element. They find an element, so they go to another guy who might know how to decipher the element or know where it might have come from. He's like, oh, I know a guy who might know something or other about this thing. It does lay along all those usual trappings that you'd expect out of a detective story or a crime drama, and I absolutely love it. And the fact that you have a sort of conspiracy subplot going on between JJ and the SPD. You add another layer of intrigue there. I feel like this comic uses that formula very well, while also being able to sprinkle in some classic Power Rangers action whenever Tommy is forced to use one of his powers for the final time. And I also appreciate that each time he uses his powers, it's used in a way where it's like, hey, this may be the last time you will see the Red Turbo Ranger, the Black Dino Thunder Ranger, but hey, he's going out with a bang for each and every one of these things. And the fact that he can't just morph all the time means that each of those times that he morphs, it's got to be used when it absolutely counts. He has to use it when it absolutely matters, when there's no option left.
Yeah. And two things that you mentioned that we'll get to specifically, but that I loved. First, as he goes through his different incarnations, I like that as the story fits it, he kind of mentions how they're different from each other. So it's not just like him in a different colored suit. It's like the Turbo Ranger is faster than the other Rangers. And he mentions how like the Zeo Ranger, Zordon said that they get stronger over time. So it's like, it's physically maybe the strongest one there. And then, Andres, I thought you mentioned like them doing the detective work and stuff. Mm-hmm. A character that they go back to has one of the most touching and heartbreaking send-offs I felt that I never would thought of for that character in this story. And I'm sure we'll get to it.
Oh,
right?
yes, absolutely. In fact, like I said, we're going into full spoilers here. So if you want to talk about that character, you can absolutely can right now.
Okay, so to give a little bit of like background on the story, Tommy and this Anara person go looking for JJ, who has disappeared into these gangs that are warring with each other, and they find out that they're warring with the crystals that power the from the morphing grid, more or less. So that's part of what the issue is. Tommy uses like the Dino Charge morpher at first to kind of fight off some of the guys, and then at a second time he has to use the turbo one because he needs to be faster because there's like a bunch of them around. He does run into JJ, and kind of his idea is that JJ might be under control like he was when he first appeared in the series, right? And Rita was controlling him. Right. And in fact, they make reference to somebody called the Witch who is controlling him. So that, of course, like tips the hat towards Rita, right?
Yes. Great.
Anyway,
I will say the use of the Witch as this like crime lord, great red herring there. I love the use of Rita as a red herring here.
Right. It was fantastic because everybody's like, oh, Rita, and we'll get to who it is.
Yeah.
But you said it's a red herring. So Tommy goes, and I thought this was such a great sequence to track down. He knows magic's involved. He goes to see somebody who might be able to put him on the right path, and they don't like tell you who it is. So he just kind of goes to this apartment, and it's Finster from like way back in Mighty Morphin, who would like sculpt all of Rita's monsters.
Yes.
And this is what you talked about with like the nice nods to the TV series and for fans. Finster mentions that since Zordon died and his like wave went out and kind of turned most of the older villains, freed them from the evil that would had them kind of trapped. Finster's basically become like an artist, right? He's just like a sculptor now.
Oh yeah. Trying to like make art that can bring positivity into the world, trying to make up for all that he had done before. And you can definitely tell that he deeply regrets the actions that he had made in his past life and is trying to rectify that through helping Tommy.
And he and Tommy seem to have made peace with their background a long time ago. I don't know if I'd call them friends, but Tommy's definitely pleased with how Finster's come along, right?
Yeah.
So Finster gives Tommy this like it's kind of like a box that it's a little bit vague, but he says can help like dampen the magic, presumably Rita's magic, for a while, to help him out with the situation. And do you want to tell him like who the person is? Like, because I thought it was a really cool twist.
Oh, for sure.
And it was this one person.
Oh yeah. Like, well, the lead up to who the Witch is, revolves around a lot of misdirections, a lot of misleadings of the protagonist, which again is classic noir storytelling. They think it's Rita, it's not Rita. They think that there's a conspiracy going on with SPD. There kind of is. It's revealed that JJ is in actuality still working under SPD, but is going undercover as an individual who defected from SPD in order to join the ranks of the Witch, in order to spread around these demonic crystals, power crystals that allows them to become pseudo false rangers of sorts. We get a really neat, wicked design for like this sort of like demonic take on a Green Ranger suit that JJ wears temporarily for one scene. But ultimately it's revealed that he is the one who is behind it all is none other than Scorpina, a character who has disappeared from Power Rangers lore after season 1 and had never returned, has never been explained. It's never been officially explained what happened to her until this graphic novel. And what they do for her, what they explain for her, is, I think, was so clever. The fact that she at one point attempted to usurp Rita by stealing her books and learning a bit of magic herself. This caused her to be Rita to banish her to the Talos dimension, where Lokar, I think was Lothar or Lokar?
Lokar, which is a deep cut. He was only in like
Yes.
I think 2 episodes of
Yes,
MMPR.
but he was such a big deal. He was like, he was such a immense force of an immense force of evil that to bring back both Lokar and Scorpina, I felt was so appropriate in terms of like sort of like tying up these ancient loose ends that go right back to the beginning of where this franchise started is just so clever and so much fun to see play out.
Right, and they even explained it well in that they weren't affected by Zordon's wave because they were in a different dimension.
Yes, absolutely. Which, by the way, the fact that it's called the Talos Dimension is pretty clever because in Jew Ranger, the big robot that is used at the end of the series is called Dora Talos, named after the Greek statue itself. So here, it's kind of like Bandora's Palace. That's the name of Rita in Jew Ranger, and I find it so appropriate that this sort of like big boss Lokar is used for this story because again in Jew Ranger that is literally Satan himself. His name is Dai Satan or Great Satan. So the fact that you have Scorpina essentially is trying to sacrifice JJ to fucking Satan himself. And you have like Tommy who ends up teaming up with SPD, the Blue Centurion, with Cat and anyone else he can get a hold of to have this one last stand against Scorpina and her goons is I feel like such a proper send off for. Such a great way to close out this story, and the fact that you end up having at first I was disappointed with how abruptly and quickly the ending was for this climax, but then earlier they established that they only have minutes to execute this sacrifice, and if it doesn't work, Lokar will get impatient, and that's ultimately what happens with this story. But yeah, I want to know what your thoughts were on them bringing back Scorpina and Lokar.
So I loved that because they were characters that Scorpina was like a fan favorite villain, if you will, for seasons 1 and 2.
Absolutely, yeah.
For like, and then Lokar like seemed like a Thanos level type of big bad when he came on, and then just kind of like disappeared. After they kind of relegated him back to his dimension. So I thought a fantastic idea to bring him back there. And to loop it back around, I mentioned that Tommy went to see Finster, and once like the magic box that was kind of made for Rita doesn't do much towards Scorpina, she goes back and kills Finster. And he had like sculpted kind of like a golem of himself, I guess, to like tell Tommy what he could to help him out. And then Tommy's like talking to Finster, this golem, because the actual Finster's dead and the golem doesn't have much time, and it's like collapsing as he's talking to him, but also like, you know, thanking Tommy for all that he's done for him. I don't know, that was a great scene in that respect too.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe like, the funny thing was, as a kid who was watching Power Rangers growing up, I always get the feeling that Finster wasn't as evil as the rest of the characters. It was probably due to like how the voice actor portrayed the character. He spoke very softly, very politely. He seemed like it always seemed like Rita was bullying him into creating these monsters for her. Again, which is very funny because he is nothing like that in Jew Ranger. Pleapley Khan, he's very much so an old, grumpy, he's a grouchy old man who takes great pride in his work, to the point where Rita has to please him, or Bandora has to please him in order to get him to say, okay, I'll make something for you, but you gotta wait because I only make the best, most evil monsters ever. But yeah, he's nothing like that. I would say arguably he's nothing like that in Power Rangers. And so for them to sort of like, for Kyle Higgins to play into that softer side of Finster to get us to sympathize for him as a victim who was wanting to rectify his mistakes only for things to end so tragically, but for the character to sort of like be so optimistic rather than he's very remorseful, but also is very optimistic that Tommy will get the job done. And he's like, hey, listen, don't blame yourself for what happened to me. I take this as punishment for what I've done before. You focus on your son. I'm sure you'll get him back. Everything's going to be all right. And before he ultimately, wastes away. And again, going back to like the noir reference, I gotta wonder if that moment was like a reference to how the book of Who Censored Roger Rabbit ended. Because I'm sure you remember in Who Censored Roger Rabbit, without spoiling that book, things do. You get a duplicate of a certain character who also slowly wastes away. And the book ends with that character like essentially falling apart like Finster does here. So I gotta wonder if Kyle Higgins somehow was also throwing in another reference in there, because the parallels are just too uncanny to ignore.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought the same thing as I was looking at that section of the comic again. I was like, yeah, this does remind me of the Who Censored Roger Rabbit book. Where it occurs there, which for you and I, because we're both such big noir fans, again, just like really did it for me and made me more engaged in the story.
Absolutely, for sure. And I guess like I talked a little bit about the climax itself, but what were your thoughts in how everything wrapped up by the end?
I thought it was pretty good. Like you said, the final battle is quick. But they did establish that would be the case, because like basically Scorpina has to sacrifice something of value to Lokar, or else he's going to drag her back to Talos for like hell for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
And basically what you get is Tommy's there. And this is what I thought was really neat too, is he morphs into every version of himself except for the Green Ranger. So when it comes time to morph to the Green Ranger, he frees his son and basically tosses the Master Morpher to him, and like a literal passing of the torch, so that JJ becomes the Green Ranger, like the Ranger Tommy is probably most known for being. And it's at that time that you see SPD shows back up and Kat shows back up to help out her son and her husband, and you do see like Shadow Ranger in the background kind of there helping out too, which I thought was cool. So they're basically like fighting a giant Scorpina. They don't bring the Zords in or anything, because they only have to keep her busy for which was like 3 minutes or something like that.
3 or 4 minutes.
It's a very short amount of time, and it ends with Scorpina basically being dragged back to Talos to suffer the wrath of Lokar for not fulfilling her end of her bargain if he like sent her back to Earth, basically. So like I could have used a little bit more there, but there's enough action throughout the rest of the comic that I didn't really mind that it's a quick wrap up at the end. What do you think about like that idea?
Oh yeah. Like I figured like there was just so much build up. Like the comic definitely was prioritizing more of so like the world building, the detective like narrative going on. We had sprinkles of action here and there every time Tommy morphed. It felt like a lot of the story. I'm not sure if this story was made with a specific page count in mind, but it felt like a lot of it was spent on the build up, that everything just sort of like kind of like was wrapped up in a neat bow by the end. I could have, if there's one criticism, I guess it could have been longer. It would have been nice, even though Kat was there on the battlefield, it would have been nice to see her morph one last time, whether it was Mighty Morphin Pink or Zeo or Turbo. But I bet you that wasn't done, because that would have taken away from like the moment of the passing of the torch moment between Tommy and his son. Just having his son Oliver there to literally let go of his responsibilities and passing them off to JJ, both figuratively, symbolically, and literally, I thought was very well done. And like that was pretty much like the emotional payoff for this entire book. So the fact that that was done as well as it was, I think was really cool. I would have enjoyed just having a more like one-on-one battle between Tommy and Scorpina, or even we did get a Tommy and Scorpina before she turns giant. I would have said it would have been cool if we got maybe a few more pages of, let's say it was JJ who summons the Dragon Zord to finish off Scorpina, but I bet you I bet you that probably wasn't done, because otherwise that would have just like shifted from noir storytelling to straight up fucking kaiju and mechas fight. I don't. It's hard to tell there. I'm bet you that Kyle Higgins probably wanted a more smaller scale story, and so he was trying to have his cake and eat it too by having a big action set piece while still keeping things relatively small scale by Power Ranger standards.
Right. I was going to say, like, you and I, again, we watch a ton of noir stuff, and please go see our reviews. They're really fun. But very few noir stories end with like a huge battle at the end, right? It's
very
usually
true,
like a little bit more subdued. So I do think like what you hit the nail on the head, and like it would have been cool, obviously, to see the Dragonzord show up and fight the giant Scorpina with JJ. But I think also it would have taken away from the smaller scale of the story, which seemed to fit the characters better in terms of their growth.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. And like you said, like most like noir stories, they usually end in a very quick like shootout, or there's like one final like encounter between the protagonist and the antagonist before something goes horribly wrong, and then the character's just there to lament what just happened. So yeah, I would say
and
that,
it's often like sorry to cut you off. It's often in a noir story, kind of like the villain is sort of hoisted on their own petard type of thing, which is what occurred here, where Scorpina they ran out of time, so she ended up like her deal with the devil fell through, more or less.
Very true, yeah. And like you said, so in times like these, the villains fall victim to their own comeuppance. So I definitely got to hand it to Kyle Higgins for being as much fan service as he throws into this book. He knows when to pull back and not be too indulged in that sort of thing. So by the end of the story, we have Tommy. He's ready. He and Kat are ready to go off on vacation, ready to leave the past behind them, take comfort in knowing that what they had done was enough, and that it's now time to leave that responsibility of keeping the world safe on, passing that responsibility on to the next generation with Anara and JJ. I thought it was, it couldn't have been a perfect ending for these characters. It's all about, a lot of it was just Tommy learning to let go of the past, to embrace what he still has to enjoy in life, and just sort of like learning to accept that his time as a ranger is over and that it's not his responsibility anymore. It's a very, I feel like it's a very relatable thing for anyone, especially of Tommy's age. Just we always have that idea in our head of, did we do enough? Could there have been more that we could have done? Even if you're not at a retirement age, it's still that idea of like, was there anything else I could have done here to have made things better for myself or for anyone else out there? And so there's always going to be that sort of sense of regret, that sense of like, of responsibility in there. I feel like a lot of people can relate to. So to see him becoming at peace with himself and where he's at in life, it was, I would say, very satisfying to see.
Yeah, I would say I can definitely relate to that. And also, like, to wrap it up too, JJ does tell him, like, no, Dad, you did a fine job, and JJ's ready, and he's JJ now feels he himself is ready to be a hero. Mm-hmm. But I found it very relatable. Like, I just entered my late 40s, and my oldest daughter's in her senior year of high school, and I'm like constantly thinking, like, have I done enough to make sure she's ready to go out into the world and do her own stuff? Right. So I felt like very relatable in that sense, as a father and a teacher and stuff like that. So I can't really, like you said, a few nitpicks here and there on this story that I definitely agree with, but I really enjoy the story, and I can't recommend it enough, I think, for Power Rangers fans.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely, man. Also, like, one last thing I do want to mention about him, like, leaving the Ranger life behind. It's very funny how, like, they treat this is like not so much a nitpick, but just sort of like an interesting observation. They treat, the destruction of the power coins as like, oh, this is the last time Tommy can ever be any of these Rangers. And yet Tommy and so many Rangers have lost their powers time and time again, only to get them back in time for the next anniversary crossover. So
oh, sure,
it's very possible that Tommy could have had that Master Morpher fixed and all of his power coins restored. But like, I guess it says something for Tommy to be like, you know what? I've had enough. I don't need this Morpher of mine restored. I'm done with the life now. That's at least how I saw it. But like, it's just kind of funny that like they're saying like, oh my God, your coins are being destroyed when like this is like probably like the 5th time he's lost the Green Ranger powers or whatever.
It's like in comics, nobody's ever really dead.
Yeah. Or like, like what was it, or Emperor Palpatine? Nobody's ever really gone.
Yeah. But no, I did like that he, in his mind, was at a point where he was happy to move on with Kat and just go off and, discover whatever the next phase of their life is going to be.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like that is definitely like, again, another relatable moment there where it's like, we don't know what life has in store for us. So all we can do is just, rather than staying in the same spot as we always are, rather we need to move forward and see where life takes us next. And, I'd say that's that's probably like the best way to end the story of Tommy Oliver.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and you know what? It's very interesting that in the years since this graphic novel came out, the Power Rangers series eventually ended with Cosmic Fury, or at least the original continuity, as far as we know, in the year of our Lord 2026. The series has ended. There has been a couple of failed reboot projects that were unable to get off the ground. So as far as we know, the original continuity of Power Rangers has ended for good. So as far as we could tell, this is, if this comic, at least to me, is still canon and is still like the definitive end of not just of Tommy Oliver, but potentially the Power Ranger universe itself, because this takes place farther in the future than even SPD was, which SPD takes place literally last year as of this recording. So It's just kind of funny how like how the franchise turned out in a way where it kind of, with how the franchise ended, with how everything ended, it kind of gives a more sense of finality for this story.
You're very true on that. Very right. Yeah, it really does. It doesn't just wrap up Tommy; it wraps up Power Rangers.
Yeah. So again, the fact that they thought of making this story in 2018, like right off the heels of Shattered Grid, what was quite a pleasant surprise to see. I was asking myself the question of why was Kyle Higgins interested in this story? And I suppose having worked on writing Tommy so much throughout the first 8 volumes worth of Power Ranger comics, that he probably must have thought to himself, hey, you know what? I wrote, the story of Tommy Oliver as he joined the team. I wrote him coming face to face with a version of himself where things did not go so well for him. Now I want to explore the end of him, of this character. Kind of like with Frank Miller. Frank Miller, he wrote the end of Batman. Well, it was kind of like a reverse of Frank Miller. Frank Miller, he wrote the end of Batman's story and then would then create the new origin of Batman with Year One. Here it's sort of like the opposite. We have him telling the story of young Tommy before wanting to tell a version of old man Tommy.
Yeah. And then for Higgins, it would really lay the groundwork. I won't give too many spoilers for this other series, but if you like this is what I could have been, if the Power Ranger is a little bit darker, the Power Ranger is a little bit more violent, check out Radiant Black. I can't say enough good things about that for Power Rangers fans. If it's flying under your radar, you'll see a lot of the Shattered Grid and of the Soul of the Dragon type of stuff explored even deeper in that series.
Awesome. I can't wait. I've heard a lot of good things about Radiant Black, and with your recommendation, I'm definitely going to check it out. One last thing I will say, it's very interesting when it comes to look at this story's legacy, because as we speak, the Power Rangers Boom Comics is undergoing its second reboot. First was after, what was it called? What was it? I forgot what the last story arc was called, but eventually, at a point in 2024, I believe, the continuity had that started in 2016 ended, and it was replaced with a new continuity called Power Rangers Prime. And unfortunately, it seemed like Power Rangers Prime didn't do so well, so now there's a second reboot simply called Power Rangers Mighty Morphin Power Rangers 2026. And that comic features older versions of the original Mighty Morphin team who have come back who are back in action after a 10-year hiatus, which is very interesting because we just had another standalone story written by Amy Jo Johnson herself called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers The Return, which featured an older cast, an older version of the Mighty Morphin crew coming back out of retirement to fight the good fight once more. And I bring up the second reboot because not only does it feel reminiscent of The Return, but at the same time, there's a ongoing miniseries right now called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Green, focusing on an older Tommy Oliver set 100 years in the future in the middle of a post-apocalyptic landscape where he's roaming the land with Alpha 5, and apparently somehow this post-apocalyptic version of Tommy somehow ties into the 2026 reboot of the comics. So I find it very bizarre yet also somewhat intriguing that we're getting another Old Man Tommy story, just done in a very different direction than how Soul of the Dragon handled this concept.
Yeah. That is interesting. I haven't read that Green one. It sounds like that Batman story they did where Batman was walking around with a Joker's head. It was like Last Night on Earth or something like that. But I'll definitely check it out because I do like most of what Boom has done. So
yeah, I just gotta wonder what made them want to do Old Man Tommy again after it was done so well with Soul of the Dragon. But who knows? It's probably got something to do with some big plan they have for the 2026 reboot. So I'll whatever happens, I'm sure it's probably gonna do just fine. But I'm certain it ain't gonna be no Soul of the Dragon.
And it'd be very hard to follow this up and be better than it. That's for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure there's someone out there who's going to be like, oh, it's totally different. It's its own thing. Sure, but again, Old Man Tommy, you already kind of did it perfect the first time. Why are you doing it another time? I don't know. Right, I just wanted to bring that up just because I found the comparison so weird and funny that I couldn't not bring it up.
Yeah.
So anyways, looks like we are about to, we're pretty much done with this here review. So I would like to ask you, Matt, final thoughts on this comic.
Like you said, a really enjoyable kind of wrap up on Tommy Oliver and a really engaging story. I can only highly recommend it for fans.
Absolutely. I think it's a wonderful, it works on so many levels. It works as a send-off to Tommy Oliver. It works as a very fun one-off detective story set in the Power Rangers universe. Whether you're a fan of the comics or of the TV show, or heck, even if you're a Super Sentai purist, I'd say there is still something to enjoy with Soul of the Dragon. So, yes. So, with that said, where can people find you, Matt?
On Facebook, on Twitter, X, whatever the case is. And you just find my webpage through Google. So, haven't anything new come out in a little bit, but I have a few smaller projects I'm working on. So, hopefully they'll be out soon. Excellent.
And as always, you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, and Blue Sky under Kaiju Noir. You can find me on Instagram also at Kaiju Noir. Follow me on Twitter at PW_Drake and on Facebook at Primal Warrior Drake Wazul. I recently came back from Kaiju Go over in Dallas, Texas, which was a lot of fun. And so for my last and final convention for the year, you can certainly see me in the arcade room with Creature Preacher selling our stuff over at San Francisco Godzilla Fest. from September 18th through the 20th. So definitely check if you're in the Bay Area or anywhere on the West Coast. You'll be sure to find me over there. So until next time, everyone, I've been Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
And I've been Matt Dennion.
And until next time, everyone, it's morphin' time!
Yeah!